Once again, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm here to introduce our next section, the human element of technology. This panel aims to shed light on what technology ventures are built of: people. We will discuss how recruiting, retaining, and developing people, particularly in early-stage companies, is different. Also, how companies are adapting to become more attractive. We will address the most valuable traits and skills of successful entrepreneurs and executives who are disrupting different industries. For this discussion, we will have Dan Rosensweig, who will be moderated by Antoine Colaço. As chairman and CEO of JAG, Dan commits the company to fulfill its mission of putting students first and helping them save time, money, and get smarter. Under his direction, JAG has become a connected learning platform that brings together people who want to learn with the tools and resources that accelerate the achievement of their educational and career goals. Prior to JAG, Dan served as CEO of Guitar Hero and COO of Yahoo. Dan received his BA degree in political science from Harvard and William Smith College. He also sits on the board of directors of the Adobe System, ran the Runaway, and serves as a senior advisor for TPG Growth Ventures. Antoine Colaço is a partner with Valor Capital Group, pioneer cross-border venture capital firm focused on Brazil and the US, investing in a wide variety of sectors including health and wellness, education, financial services, legal tech. Prior to joining Valor, Mr. Colaço was at Google for 9 years, where he was head of strategy and operations for global partnerships, established Google's India presence, and grew its Latin America operations by launching offices in Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. Prior to joining Google, he served Yahoo Finance, Goldman Sachs, and Development Bank of Singapore. He received his BS in Mechanical and Aerospace Engineer from Princeton University. He also has an MBA from Harvard Business School. I also like to add that Valor Capital have their investments include Stone, Gympass, Cargo S, just to name a few. So please join me in welcoming Dan Rosensweig and Antoine Colaço.
Olá, bom dia, gente. What did he say? I do have a question. First of all, it's Rosensweig, not Rosenberg. And second, it says that I am Iona Sersnick. No, I'm Jim Knight. You're
okay. I'm Iona. They haven't changed the image here, so that's why Dan's mentioning that. So first of all, I wanted to first thank Dan for being here with us. You heard Dan's incredible background and so on. He's also in the middle of going on his way to one of the biggest educational conferences, and so he's been kind enough to join us here today, so we want to thank him for being here. I secondly want to thank also the organizers of this event. I think it's been, for the first time, it's a phenomenal event. You can see the quality of the speakers and the quality of the attendees as well. So if we can give a round of applause to the organizers of this conference. Thank you for that. Lastly, I also want to mention that we are taking questions from the audience, so in the app you can put your questions in, and Dan likes tough questions, so please make sure to give him tough ones. I have to start the session with a question for Dan, because Dan works across students throughout universities around this country, with universities around this country. There's a very important question and timely question to ask him right now, which is, Dan, who's going to win the game tonight? And for those Brazilians who don't know, there's something called March Madness here, which is think of it as the Copa do Brasil, which is where there are 68 teams from universities around the country which play in a tournament to win one national championship. And the final is tonight, actually, with two schools, Virginia and Texas Tech. So Dan, I know you're a sports fan. What do you think?
Giving an American college basketball prediction in front of people from Brazil is about the easiest thing I could possibly do. Because I could tell you any school in the country and you'd be like, yes. I'm predicting that Virginia's going to win.
Got some Virginia fans here.
I'm pretty sure that nobody in Silicon Valley had come from Texas Tech.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll be watching the game tonight. It's been a great.
Are there any follow-up questions?
On that one?
No, just in general.
No, there are a lot of follow-up questions. Just we'll get to them though. So I think, as we know, this panel is about the human element of technology and people and technology. You know, as I was thinking about this, through my kind of circuitous career through consulting, finance, banking, operating companies and technology, it's always been very evident that teams, the people, have been really critical for success. So it's the people you hire, the people how you manage them, and then the culture that you build within an organization. You know, and to give a little bit of context here also, so Dan and I actually overlapped at Yahoo for a brief amount of time. We didn't know each other there. We've gotten to know each other much more recently with my work at Valor, and when we're looking at ed tech companies, both in Brazil and outside of Brazil, we've been able to work with Dan and his fabulous team at Chegg, which has been an honor for us. So Dan, as was described, you've had a pretty diverse career in technology, from leading large tech companies, as well as you know, taking Chegg from what would be considered maybe not so tech to a very technological company now also. And you've had great success at each stop. What are the skills and characteristics that you believe allowed you to succeed throughout all those steps of your career?
That's a long question. Look, I don't know that you ever really succeed or don't succeed. I sort of have a view that you don't really know if you succeeded or failed until about the last minute of your life, because there's always an opportunity to get up the next day and do something. And you know, I have a sort of running joke with my team and actually with my daughters, which is, if you set the bar low enough, I'll clear it. If that doesn't translate well, it means I essentially take the jobs that others won't take. And so I think that what's always been inherent in the way that I manage, or the opportunities that I go after, the cultures that we try to build, is always finding people who truly believe in the mission and want that mission to succeed more than they will worry about individual problems on a daily basis. And that is because when you build a company, and particularly when you're in the technology industry, or because of the impact of technology, change happens all the time. It happens much faster. It comes unanticipated. There'll be a competitor that gets built the next day that you didn't expect. And if you worry, or if everything becomes a crisis, or if everything becomes about an individual, it's very difficult to overcome them. And so I've been extraordinarily fortunate that at Chegg in particular, I've been there now 9 years, when I was only expected to be there really 2 years. And my team, the members of the C team, I think the one that's been there the least amount of time has been there 6.5 years. In a town where the average person stays 18 months. Hi. Can I help? Okay. So, it's not at all distracting. So from my standpoint, what I believe it takes is, I think it takes believing in a mission, and I think the role of a CEO now has evolved so dramatically into somebody who focuses on culture and communication and caring and course correcting. You're going to see a bunch of C's in here, because I think that's what C teams ultimately do now. And it's really about collaboration and chemistry and building trust. And if you do that, if you're able to convince everybody that where we want to go is a place that's worth going, and you can help them define what the problem is we're trying to overcome, but you give them permission to figure out what's the best way to solve it, as long as that they communicate, then you can build a culture that's sustainable. And Cheg's been very fortunate to be able to do it. And you know, the two times that worry CEOs most are when nobody believes, nobody cares, and you're not sure. And that happens to every founder and every CEO that I've ever met. There's that moment. And Chegg was at that for a bunch of years because we were told we were 6 months away from an IPO when I joined the company. Turned out we were 90 days away from going broke, which is a very different set of expectations. And so the other side is where we are now, which probably scares me more, which is when everybody believes and everybody has high expectations, and the fear is that everybody will assume someone else will do the hard work because everything's going so well. So those are the two extremes of companies. We've experienced both. We are navigating the second one now. But I do believe that we live in a world where it's really about culture and communication and chemistry and collaboration and trust and transparency. And there's no such thing as over-communicating at this point, because the more people understand, the more they're likely to do the things that will matter the most.
So following on to that, you know, there's this impression that the qualities that people working at a larger company.
He's just playing video games. It's okay.
the qualities that employees at larger companies need is different from what an entrepreneur must have, let's say. Do you believe that, and what do you think the differences are?
You know, I often get asked to speak at business schools, and there's a bunch of subjects that people ask about, but one of the ones that I focus the most on, because it's very difficult to imagine yourself as an Elon Musk or a Mark Zuckerberg or a Brian Chesky or a Larry Ellison or a Bill Gates. There really aren't a lot of them. Jeff Bezos, they over-index in visibility and popularity and wealth and influence, but there really aren't a lot of them. So what I end up talking about a lot is what's the difference between a founder, an entrepreneur, and an executive. And you find that at larger companies that are not tech, you find a number of executives, which are very, very important. They're very powerful. They make important decisions. They're very smart. But when there's a better opportunity, they get to go. And they're not as willing to take a risk, or even if they are, they're not really in the position to be allowed to take that risk, because the company itself is an entity that has its own momentum. The flip side is the founder. How many of you are founders? Wow, I'm going to make you all angry. Because the thing I've learned about founders is you're never wrong in your opinion. You're never wrong. It was never your fault. It was the venture capitalists didn't understand. You were so brilliant, you were years ahead of the market. And the only sin of a founder is to admit that they were wrong. Now, that seems to be what we have in our political system right now. But it's really remarkable, because founders are a unique breed. And Mark Andreessen, who's very well known, once told me that founders are, by their nature, a pain in the ass. Because they see things that others don't see. They believe in things that others are trying to think about, and they don't have to think about it. They're trying to solve a problem that's so clear to them that it's easy for them to see it, and we're all idiots because we don't. And so I have been an idiot now in Silicon Valley for 17 years. Still going strong. So what I would say about founders is, you're only a founder. You're really only going to succeed as a founder if there's a true problem that you're trying to solve, that you see, and that you're going to be successful if you can convince others around you that what's in your head is worthy of going after, convincing people to do it with you, convincing people to fund you, and not worrying about anybody else, right, in the room. Because at the end of the day, most founders ask your opinion so that you'll validate theirs. And if you don't agree with their opinion, they move on. And that's good, because that's how you get a Tesla. That's how you get a Facebook. That's how you get a Rent the Runway. These are all things where everybody at the time said, it will not work, why are you doing this? I'm on the board of Rent the Runway. They've just become a unicorn. They have one of the greatest CEOs that you could possibly imagine. And I think there were hundreds of male VCs that said to her, no one's ever going to rent a dress. Now she's got the fastest growing subscription service where nobody buys clothes, they just rent them. So founders are unique. And then there's this transition between executive and founder where I find myself today, which is entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur is, in my opinion, these are just my definitions. So I didn't really become an entrepreneur until I was 40. Now you may say, Dan, but you've been doing this for 18 years, but you only look 35.
That's what I was thinking for sure.
Look, there's a million people watching this. They need to know I'm young. So that transition is when you finally decide that you're acting like an owner. That you want to make that final decision. That you want to fight for that mission. That you want to fight for your team. That you want to, no matter what the obstacles are, they're nothing but problems that need to be solved. They're not brick walls. And that when you can transform that environment culturally into what you believe in. And so you don't have to found something to do that. It's a term that I'm calling now in this town called refounders. So if you have refounders, if you look at PayPal, if you look at Adobe, if you look at ServiceNow, those are just three. You look at LinkedIn with Jeff Weiner. So you look at John Donahoe, Shantanu Narayan, Jeff Weiner, Dan Schulman. These are all people who didn't found their companies, but every one of them has either been running it longer than the founder did, and the company, they've created a lot more value under their watch than the founder did. And so an entrepreneur is somebody who may not come up with the original idea, which is something that I'm probably never going to be able to do. That is uniquely a gift of founders. But we can take something and make it our own and make it bigger. And so the issue is at large corporations, how many people do you need in the right positions to make that transition? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. Going back to your comment about founders and entrepreneurs, what's a common mistake? I know they're never wrong, but what is a common mistake that you've seen in founders?
How many founders in the room? No mistakes.
Never.
No. It's in Silicon Valley, no mistakes. Look, I think, I wouldn't say this is a mistake. I would say that I have been very fortunate to have met just about everybody that you have thought about or compete with or want to compete with or want their market caps. And the one thing is that every one of them at a moment in time is human and they all face doubt. And so there was a time when every company that you can think of almost sold themselves. And at that moment of doubt, there's something about a certain kind of founder who pulls back at that last moment and says, you know what? It's been validated, I'm just going for it. And so what I would say is when you're a founder, if you're in it for the money, sell as quickly as you can. If you're in it to solve the problem that you got in it to solve, take as much time as it needs.
So we talked about founders' mistakes. What are mistakes that you made in your career, and how did you learn from them?
Well, I came here. I insulted all the founders. Look, we only have 45 minutes.
Yeah, you got to keep it short. So.
Yeah, you do not have time to go through my mistakes. But I would say that, look, with age comes wisdom. And for me, wisdom is nothing more than having to have made a lot of decisions in your career or in your life and actually having to live with the consequence and being honest enough to tell the truth about them. That's it. It's not that we outsmarted anybody. But I would say the thing that the Dan of now versus the Dan of 2002 is a little bit more patient, believe it or not. Is a little bit more trusting, believe it or not. A little bit more willing to play the long game. And that means not only the long game on the idea or the business model, but on the people that I'm with. The grass is not always greener. And so if the grass is not always greener with a business opportunity, then it's not always going to be greener with an employee, right? Or with an idea. And so I think it's having more patience, more commitment. I learned something from my amazing mentor who sadly passed away a few years ago, the amazing Bill Campbell. And I'm sure if we had Scott Cook up here, he may have mentioned Bill Campbell because Bill ran his company and became the chairman of Intuit. But Bill has a view on leadership, which I think if you're not a founder, it's really tough to embrace, because founders, they never doubt this. But the rest of us can doubt it, which is, when things aren't going well, if you allow yourself to say, I can leave, if you only have 1 foot in, it doesn't work. And I've had that situation a couple of times in my career, including at Chegg. And you know, the famous story is this: Bill Campbell. Anybody know who Bill Campbell is? Good, so you know. And if the rest of you who don't, there's a book coming out on him, written by Eric Schmidt and a bunch of other people who loved and cared for Bill. And Bill was the coach of Silicon Valley. Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Eric Schmidt, Steve Jobs, people like that. And my team was very fortunate enough to have him. And he was passing away of cancer, and we hadn't seen him. He used to come up every month for 3 hours. He attended every board meeting, and he was a yeller, a curser, a screamer, and a big hugger. And he cared only about our team, and it gave us a sense of confidence and trust that we could tell him anything. And that was a big relief, believe it or not. And so I remember there was a time where Chegg wasn't going well, and I got a call from a headhunter that actually offered me my dream job, or the chance to interview for my dream job since I've been 10 years old. Think about that. I was in the car with my daughter. She's like, Dad, you have to do this. This is all you've ever talked about. And so I went through the process, and somehow or another he found out, because the son of a bitch knew everything. And he called me up one day, and my assistant said, Dan, Bill's on the phone. I was like, oh my God, I wonder, you know, is this the moment? So I run upstairs, I take the call, I said, Bill, everything okay? He said, yes, I'd like to take a walk. And I said, wow, if you're well enough to walk, I'll be at your house in 20 minutes. He goes, no, 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 you're not coming here. I was like, wow, if you could come here, everybody would love to see you. We'll get all the employees together. He's like, no, I'm not coming there. I said, well, where are we going? He said, we're going to take a virtual walk. And I said, well, where are we going? He said, well, we're going to go back behind the woodshed. And I don't know if you know what that means, but basically young people were taken behind the woodshed when they needed a little course correcting. So I said, should I leave my pants on or take them off? And he said, leave them on, but you're going to feel it. And I said, all right. And he said, Dan, are you a leader? And this was, I got no chance to answer anything. He said, are you a leader? Because leaders go forward. They don't go side to side. They don't go backwards. They go forward. You can't lead people going backwards or to the side. No leader has 1 foot in the arena. Every great leader has 2 feet in the arena. What kind of leader are you? And he just hung up the phone. And that day, I called my entire team in. I said, I'm committed to the next 3 years no matter what the hell happens. Tell me right now, are you in or are you out? If you're out, we'll figure it out. But if you're in, you cannot leave unless it's a family situation or your dream job comes along, and I agree with you. And since that day, not one of my executives has left. Pretty powerful. So what I learned was, it's hard enough to succeed doing anything. It's impossible if you're not fully committed.
And I think that point of honesty is also something that's really important. I mean, we see it when we're investing in companies also. Sometimes we see that founders want to only show their best foot forward, which you've got to understand in a certain way, but I think also it's you know, investors, the people around them are there to actually help through the problems, not just hear the good things. And I think that every company has its ups and downs, as you said. You know, every person has their ups and downs. I think that's a critical piece that I think makes a lot of sense also. We've got limited time, and I want to get to some of the questions, but let me ask you one more question. This is a Brazil conference, as we all know, and Brazil's a large country, exports a lot of talent around the world. So we've seen some people here, Jorge Paulo Lemann, Carlos Brito, Hugo Vara, are all proof of that. But Brazil tech, entrepreneurship, the scene is still actually relatively small compared to the country as a whole, and we visited the country. I know. What do you think is the tipping point which pushes kind of talented individuals into becoming entrepreneurs, and how, as a community, can we foster that in Brazil?
So there needs to be a few things. First of all, the one thing that Brazil is not lacking is young people with a passion and a desire to do great things. So there's a critical mass of young people willing to take risks. That's probably the single most important thing. And by the way, it is proven in the United States that entrepreneurs of older ages are actually less of a risk. But it really takes that I have no responsibility, I'm not worried about anything, I can take all the risks in the world, and that's easier for young people. Plus, they're not jaded by the rules and regulations. So in Silicon Valley, I worked for a gentleman named Terry Semel, who when I was at Yahoo, and he was the CEO of Warner, and the co-chairman of Warner, which made all the big movies, Batman, The Matrix, you name it. And he said the difference between Silicon Valley and Hollywood is this. In Hollywood, the first person into any room for any meeting on any new idea is the lawyer. In Silicon Valley, the last person hired on the C team is the general counsel. And so I think what has to happen is you have to decide what laws are really laws and what laws are been created in the best interest of businesses that don't want competitors. And what I've seen in this country is young people are more willing to take that risk. The second thing is you need funding, like the Lord, right? But you guys do cross-border funding, you do lots of smart things, but there needs to be even a critical mass of more investors in the big cities where you can build enough critical mass of talent, enough critical mass of money, and then what has to happen is everybody needs to rally around technology as the way to improve people's lives and the situations, even though it may occasionally screw up pretty badly. But we can't let the naysayers say because social media is in a crisis right now that technology isn't good. Technology does cause disruption. It does put people out. There has to be support systems for that. But overall, it needs critical mass of people in the same city, enough dialogue, enough funding, and enough runway. And for the venture capitalists in the room, they probably won't like this, which is I think the venture capitalists need to, particularly when companies like these are starting out, give them more money and take less value for it. Because they're going to need a longer runway than you think, because a lot of things have to be invented. How many founders like that? More cash, less equity in them? All right, so I'm back to a good grace.
Yeah, you went from one side to the other, well done, in a matter of 30 minutes. Yeah, I think we're seeing, in Brazil it's very interesting, I think we're seeing those pockets actually grow, not only in major cities like Sao Paulo and Rio and so on, we're seeing it in many more cities throughout Brazil, which is actually very exciting. So Curitiba, we're even seeing things in Recife and so on.
Well, let me ask, who here has an opinion on what it will take for Brazil to be a breakout? It's big enough to be one. It's enough, smart enough entrepreneurs. We've seen other countries, particularly in Europe, because of their laws and because of the way they work and because of all the restrictions, we haven't seen very many breakouts coming out of Europe. But we've seen a ton coming out of Asia, right? What do you think it will take to make a big breakout in Brazil? Execution. Yes, the other side of it is if you have a good idea, you better make it work. Because once you have one or two big successes, everybody will flock there. Education. On what? Just basic education. So are you trying to educate people to build the companies? Or are you trying to educate people to consume what the companies build? Both. Well, sure. Yeah, no, look, I think you need an educated workforce and you need an educated consumer base. And I think that's absolutely necessary. And I think I met just briefly two really smart young entrepreneurs in the education space who are taking that on, which is, the truth is most big countries don't have support systems for young people to learn. And that's the reason Chegg can exist even in this country. Because, I mean, we have 14.5 million registered users, and if you believe the analysts, by the end of the year we'll have over 4 million people subscribing to teaching you how to learn the content you're supposed to be learning at college. So I would imagine that's very similar in Brazil.
Let me ask one last question, which comes from the audience, actually. Yeah. So the top question here is, as more jobs become obsolete, how do we reframe education systems towards teaching future-proof skills? Just a small question to end the call.
Yeah, look, I'm, the good news and the bad news, and they're equal parts right now, which is there's no such thing as a job that can't be replaced by something, somewhere, sometime. It's happened through the history of time. So, in the United States, on the good news front, there's more Americans now than there've ever been. There's 318 million of us, and we have the lowest unemployment that we've seen in a long time, and more people are in the workforce because more genders, more diverse backgrounds are in the workforce than ever before. And we're the most technologically advanced country, so therefore you can make the statement that technology does over time create more jobs. However, there's a 10, 15, or 20-year gap where the jobs it destroys can destroy towns, cities, and industries. And it shouldn't be the goal to destroy an industry. It should be a goal to produce a better result for the consumer. And if that affects an industry, so be it. But what we know in this country is that 50% of high school students don't go on to college. And of the 50% that don't go on, it's something like over 50% of the jobs that they take today won't exist. And so I think if you go back to your basic education point, the definition of what is basic education has to evolve. It has to evolve to appreciate the way we learn typing, or to write cursive, right? Or to write block letters. You're going to have to learn that, to learn how to use a database and financial systems. And it's not that everybody needs to learn to code. People who learn to code will get paid a lot of money and have a lot of jobs. But there's a lot of people in marketing and finance. If you're not a master of Excel, you're not getting hired into finance. Doesn't matter how smart you are. If you can't extract information from databases, then you're not going to go into research or marketing. So there needs to be basic skills, which I think a company like Chegg will end up teaching one day, which is, what are the big things? If you want to go into sales in this country, you better know how to use Salesforce. If you want to go into creative, you better know how to use Adobe. If you want to go into finance or business or analytics or M&A, you better know how to use Office 365, right? If you want to go into finance, you better know how to use, whether it's the Oracle databases or Anaplan, or if you want to go, if you're going to work in HR, you're going to need how to use Workday and ServiceNow. And so these are just the basics that I think people need to learn just to be employable. It doesn't mean they shouldn't learn those other things. But these are things that can actually be learned very well online and for very little money. And I think we have an obligation to do it. Does that help?
Absolutely. So please join me in thanking Dan. It was great to hear from you. Thanks so much.